from the Savior above. Showers of blessing, showers of blessings we need. Mercy drop round us are falling, but for the showers we plead. The shabby showers of blessing, precious reviving again. Over the hills and the valley, sound of abundance of rain. Showers of blessing, showers of blessings we need. Mercy drop round us are falling, but for the showers we plead. Thank you.
Thank you, Swati ma'am. Next, I am inviting Ms. Suchina ma'am for welcome speech. Welcome, Suchina ma'am.
Thank you, Ramya ma'am. Good evening, all. It's my pleasure to welcome all to today's plus class. Every child have right to live. We should have to know about what's the children's rights and related laws. For that, a warm welcome to our honorable guest, Advocate Arathi Gopal. Madam, please welcome to our training program.
Thank you.
And our respected faculties, Smita ma'am and Ashwati ma'am, please welcome to our section. And my dear friends and trainee teachers, in morning and evening batch, all of you welcome to our class. Thank you.
Thank you, Suchina ma'am. Now let us welcome our NCDC faculties, Ms. Smita ma'am, to render the presidential speech. Welcome, Smita ma'am.
Thank you so much, Ramya ma'am. Good evening, Ms. Arathi ma'am, and all my trainee teachers. As teachers, it is very, very important for us to know the different problems the children, your students may be facing. Some of them may be subjected to neglect, abuse, violence, and exploitation anywhere. This can happen inside the school premises or at home or in any other non-school environments. A child in your class may be a victim of violence that happens outside the school, but then also you cannot ignore it. Rather, you must help the child. To make this possible, you should be able to identify their problems, and you should try to spend time to understand how you can help them out. Always remember that as teachers, it is your duty to protect the children, and it does not come to an end once you are out of the school premises. The life of a child who is out of the school system can be changed with your positive intervention. So you have to prepare yourself and know about their problems as well as what you can do to help them. So to understand more about this topic, we have our guest expert, Advocate Arathi Gopal with us. So without wasting much time, we would like to hear what she has to tell us about more about this child rights and laws to protect the children. So thank you so much, all of you, for being here, and let us get into the guest session. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Smita.
So I think I can take over.
Yes, ma'am.
Ramya ma'am, please invite her. Ramya ma'am.
Yes. I would like to welcome our special guest, Ms. Arathi Gopal ma'am. Can come, welcome ma'am.
Thank you. Happy to take over. So, good evening, everyone. If somebody had missed the earlier good evening now.
Good evening, ma'am.
Yes. So, as Smita ma'am had rightly pointed out, we are going to talk about the rights that are important for children. So, before we get into understanding child rights in detail, let's first understand why. Why is it important? Why is it important to give any child a right? Or for that matter, all the rights. Let me first tell you an example. If you think about, let's say, a tree. So if you think about a tree, how is it that you plant a sapling first, right? First you plant a small sapling. And when you plant a sapling, is it like a tree? Do you take care of it like a tree? No. What do? You actually give it water, you give it enough sunlight, and you give favorable conditions for the plant to grow and become a tree so that it can give you fruit or shade or whatever the plant or the tree gives. So the tree gives. So it is important that, and at a time when you're vulnerable, at a time when you're small, when you're growing, you need to be supported. Likewise, children are also fragile. They're going through a very vulnerable stage. They don't understand the things happening around them. So they need good guidance and they need help from teachers, parents, caregivers, their guardians, so that they can grow and develop into better, like good human beings and, become mentally and physically developed in a good way. I hope you understand. So I would like to start my presentation. That was the intro. So I'm going to share my screen. Are you able to see this?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to start the presentation. Okay. So let's remember what Nelson Mandela has once said. He had said that history will judge us by the difference we make in the everyday lives of children. And why is it so? It's because history, people will see how we have let our children grow so that they become, when they become a part of the society, when they grow up, if they become good human beings, that means we have done our duty as parents or as caregivers or as teachers. So by remembering the words of this great personality, let's move into the presentation. Yes. So before we go into child rights, let's understand the meaning of the word child. Because child rights is like, if you can understand the child rights, that phrase has two words, one being child and the other one being rights. So what is a child? So there are a lot of definitions saying what a child is, or what is the age for a human being to be recognized as a child. So let's first look at a universal definition, a definition that is followed by almost all of the countries in the world. That was given by United Nations Convention on the Rights of Child, UNCRC. So what did UNCRC say? UNCRC said, the Article 1 of the UNCRC, from here on, I'm going to refer to as CRC, Convention on Rights of Child. So CRC says, a child means every human being below the age of 18 years, unless under the law applicable to the child, majority is attained earlier. So in simple terms, let's just say any child or any human being under the age of 18 is a child according to RC. So that means once you to your 18th birthday, you're no more a child. I hope you understood that. Now, let's see how in Indian law a child is defined. Now, as you can see, there are from the slide that there are different laws in India defining the age to be a child or the age gap to be recognized as a child. And it is completely different. You can see a variety of a variation in the way they have expressed the ages. So let's see. Let's start from Indian Penal Code. Indian Penal Code does not define child, but Indian Penal Code section 82 and 83 clearly states that child under 7 years of age cannot be guilty of an offense, and a child under 12 years is not considered to have attained sufficient maturity to understand the nature of the act and the consequences of his conduct. Now, before I go further, I want all of you to listen carefully about what I'm going to say now, because it's very crucial that you understand what I'm going to say. Because as teachers, as Montessori trained teachers, you will most probably be dealing with very young children. And you have to understand the fact that in India, they have been completely, taken away from the purview of being punished for or capable of doing an offense. I hope you understand. Why I'm saying so is Section 82 and 83 of IPC clearly states that a child under 7 years of age cannot be guilty of an offense. That means a child under 7 years of age will not be guilty of an offense because, why they say so is because a crime consists of two parts. One is the action. Yes?
You can continue, ma'am. You can continue.
Okay. One is, just a second. I'm so sorry for the
No.
Yes. So sorry, getting back into the slide. What I was saying was crime is made up of two parts. So what are these two parts? The first part is the action. Let's say you're hitting a person. So what is the first part? The first part is the action of hitting a person, right? The second part is the intention in your mind that you know that you're hitting the person and the person is going to be hurt. That are the two parts, the mens rea and the actus reus. That is the legal terms used, which basically means you have an intention to do the crime and you have committed the crime. When it comes to children under 7 years, it's pretty obvious when all of us think it's obvious that they are not able to understand what they're doing. They're not able to have that sort of an intention to hurt another person, like the way an adult has. So they are exonerated. They don't come under the purview of being guilty of an offense. And children under 12 years, they are also presumed to be the same. But the thing is because they don't have the sufficient maturity to understand the nature of the act. So Indian Penal Code talks about 7 years being an age where you have not reached, under 7 years, you've not reached the maturity to conduct a crime. Okay. So that was the mentioning of what happened in IPC, because it was ideal. This is the right time for me to mention that when I'm mentioning IPC, and it's very important for you teachers to know that concept of law. Now, when we go to, as I was mentioning earlier, when we go to the definition of child in different Indian laws, as you see, Child Labor Protection and Regulation Act, which says child means a person who's not completed 14 years of age. So starting from there, it's 14 years if you notice. Now, when we go to Plantation Labor Act and Motor Transport Workers Act, child means a person who is not completed 15th year, his 15th year. Now we go to Immoral Traffic Prevention Act of 1956. Child means a person who has not completed the age of 16 years. Now, when we go to prohibition of child, all of us know, we are not supposed to marry according to law if you're a boy until you have completed 21 years, and if you're a girl until you've completed 18 years. So anybody, any boy under the age of 21 and any girl under the age of 18 are children according to Prohibition of Child Marriage Act. Now, the last one, the more recent acts, if you notice, the ones in 2012, the ones in 2013, 15, all starts to agree with the United Nations Convention. And progressively, we are coming into a society and legislations which agree to the age being regarded as 18. So why is it important that we know the age of the person committing the crime? In India, because of these various age groups that are mentioned, there is actually a problem. And if you remember the case of the sad situation that happened in the case of Nirbhaya in Delhi, one of the persons who were convicted was a minor, and he was going to be a major in just 3 months or so. So he was put to trial as a minor and was sentenced for only 3 years in jail. So all these little differences in the ages are can actually be regarded as loopholes for, running away from the system or escaping from the crime you have committed. So yes, it does call for a uniform age to be mentioned, but unfortunately that has not happened in India till now. So let's go to the next slide. Now, rights. The second part of the phrase child rights is rights. Rights means the basic things the person requires. Like, I have a right to speak. I have a right to live. I have a right to profess something that I want to say, right? Or you have different rights. And these are the basic rights a person holds. And the same is applicable for children also. These rights are applicable for all human beings, including children. And when there is a right, there is a corresponding duty. If I have a right to life, or if I have a right to speak, the state or the government has a duty to give me that right. So all the governments are obliged to make sure that its citizens get their rights. And why is it important that these rights be written down? Why is it important that these rights be made into proper legislations? Because if you have a problem, if my right to life has been challenged, I should go to court. I am the aggrieved person. I am the sad person there. I have to go to court. When you go to court, you can't just say my right has been violated. You can't just say, so court will ask me, which right? So I have to say which right. So I have to be clear about what I am saying. So it has to be written down somewhere. So for you to go to court as an aggrieved person, when your right is violated, it has to be written down. Same as the concept with almost all aspects of law. It has to be written down for you to go and ask for it. Now, as I mentioned, why is it to give rights for children? All human beings are born and equal in dignity and rights. So are children. They are also born free. Nobody is born in a particular system where he has to be tied down. He shouldn't be allowed to be treated equally. No, all of us are born equally, and all of us have a right to live that life to the most happiest way that person can live. The healthy development of children is crucial to the well-being, future well-being of our society. As I mentioned Nelson Mandela's words earlier, it is very important how children grow, because that is the future society. The children you're seeing right now are our future. So if you give them enough attention, they will grow and become good human beings. And as I was mentioning earlier, children depend on adults for the nurture and guidance to grow and develop towards independence. But when primary caregivers in the family cannot meet those needs, state has to step in. Whenever I say the word state, it does not mean the state of Kerala. It means the government or the country, the state, the sovereign. That is what I mean, okay, when I say the word state. So don't confuse it with the state of Kerala. Generally, in legal terms, it's called state. Thus, the state is obliged to realize the rights of children. Into the scenario in India. What is the current position of children in India? As you all know, India has more than 1/6 of the global population. One of the most populated country in the world. India has 1.3 billion people, and 40% of them are under 18 years. So if you notice, almost 50% of people in India are children. So the rest 50% are bound or are obliged to take care of the rest 50% to be the future citizens of the country. But what can you see in India? If you notice, in India, there are high levels of malnutrition, poor learning outcomes. What do you mean by poor learning outcomes? As teachers, you all should be aware of this. See, only 42.5% of children in grade 3 can read a grade 1 textbook. That means what should be the outcome of your teaching? Your outcome should be that the child should be able to understand and absorb what you're teaching, right? So your main aim is to make sure that you give proper attention to children. And let's not be a part of those set of people who don't take care of their child. Okay, so the next problem that India is facing is child marriages. Unfortunately, 1/3 of global total of child brides come from India. That reality. Next, when we go to the health aspect, 54% of adolescent girls have anemia. And if you notice, there is a high rate of violence against women and children, which is a very sad thing that happens. And next thing is sex ratio. Sex ratio means for every 1,000 boys, how many girls we have. Ideally, it should be 1,000 same. It should be same. But what we can see in India, it is only, we have the 900 girls we have for every 1,000 boys. So that is what is happening in India. That means we need to have more girls. Next one, India is having a very high number of child laborers, working children, and also neonatal mortality rate. Neonatal means newborn. Children who are just born die due to various reasons in our country, and it's one of the highest in the world. So if you notice, lot of problems are there in the society. So what, either as citizens, we can close our eyes to these things. You can always ask, what can I do? What can I do? These things exist in our society. How can I help? What should I do as a citizen? As a citizen, as a teacher, as a parent, as a guardian, as a caregiver, as someone who knows a child, we are supposed to give children their rights, their basic rights to grow and develop. For that, I will tell you what are the most basic rights that are to be given to children. Now, there are 3 places or 3 sources of rights that I'm going to mention. The first one that I'm going to mention is the Constitution of India and child rights. What is the Constitution? I hope all of you know about the Constitution of India. It is that document which tells, Constitution is a document that tells a country or a government how to run that country. It lays down laws and rules regarding how to run a country. So it came out in 1950, and at that time itself, the people who drafted our constitution had clear idea about a lot of concepts regarding child rights. And if you notice, I am going to tell you a few of them. So let us start with fundamental rights. In Constitution itself, there are 3 places where rights are mentioned or child rights are mentioned. Let's concentrate on that. The first one is fundamental rights. Second one is directive principles of state policy. And the third one is fundamental duties. Now, before you understand in depth what each right is, let me tell you what these things are. Fundamental rights means the basic right. As a human being, I deserve this. These are my rights. The fundamental basic rights. Those are fundamental rights. And what are directive principles of state policy? As the name suggests, it is a set of principles which tells the state how to make laws and policies. So in Constitution, there is a part which says, okay, state, you see, these are the ways in which you should make policy. When you're making a policy or a rule, these are the things that you should keep in mind. Now, what are fundamental duties? As I mentioned earlier, every right has a corresponding duty. Similarly, when we say that in India, from the state of India, I have a right to get these things, then as a citizen of India, I have a duty to give back to the country something. So those duties are mentioned in Article 51A. Now that you've understood what these things are, let us go into the rights mentioned in fundamental rights. So Article 14, what does Article 14 say? Article 14 says that, and I'm not going to say child in each and every word because all these things are important, are also applicable for children. So I'm just going to describe these rights it is also applicable to children. Now, what is Article 14? Article 14 talks about right to equality. What do you mean by right to equality? All of us are equal. In the eyes of law, nobody is different. Nobody is different in the eyes of law. Because you're from a different caste, because you're from a different creed, you're from a different section of the society, you are from a weaker economic section, you don't have, you are not even supposed to use the word rich or poor, I see. You are from a weaker economic section of the society. But that should not be a reason to be discriminated. Nobody is discriminated. So you are equal in the eyes of law. So our children. Now, Article 15 talks about right against discrimination. Same thing. Nobody should be discriminated. Nobody, especially women and children, Article 15.3 clearly states that. And what does Article 17 say? Article 17 talks about right to be protected from untouchability. I hope all of you know there was a time in India when people used to have this system called untouchability, which was a sad reality, but it existed. And that you have a right to be protected from that system. Now, what does Article 21 and 21A say? This is very important because this talks about one of the most important fundamental rights for children, for citizens, and for everyone. It's the right to life. So what do you mean by right to life? I have a life. How can state give me more life? I already have a life, right? That is the question that comes to everyone's mind. What do you mean by right to life? Right to life means you already have your life. True, that is true. But you have a right to live that life with dignity. You have a right to live that life with a respect that you deserve. And that is to be given by the state. And Article 21A, which was added very recently to this list, talks about the right to compulsory education. I'm going to tell you in the right to compulsory education in detail when we go into the further slides, because it's really important. We have to discuss that in detail. Now, what does Article 23 say? 23 says that a child has a right against exploitation. So what do you mean by exploitation? They have a right to being protected from being trafficked and forced into bonded labor. Okay, so you can't force a child to work. You can't force a child bonded labor as in, I hope you know, when you sometimes, if you go and if you borrow some money, well, how do you do it? If you borrow some money, you don't have the resource to pay it back. So sometimes parents let their children work, and that is not allowed. That shall not be allowed. That's against our fundamental rights, against the fundamental rights of children. Now, the next one is next fundamental right is Article 24, which clearly states that there is a prohibition for employment of children, which clearly states that child labor is prohibited. Okay, so it is not allowed for children under the age of 14 years. So let's be clear, children under the age of 14 years are prohibited from working. Now let's go to directive principles of state policy. What does directive principles of state policy say? Directive principles of state policy is asking states to keep in mind few things when they're making laws. What are those few things? First one, Article 39A, is justice on the basis of equality and free legal aid. That means when you make a law, you have to keep in mind that people are to be given justice on the basis of equality. No state can differentiate or discriminate people, okay, when they make a law. And the second one is free legal aid. Free legal aid means, as the word says, free legal aid, free legal help. That means if you go to a court and you do not have money or you do not have the resources to keep a lawyer, what should you do? You can ask for help and you will be provided with a lawyer. That is the meaning of free legal aid. Now, what does Article 39E say? Says, Article 39E says, protection from abuse and force by economic necessity. You have been protected, children have been protected from abuse and force by economic necessity. As I was mentioning earlier about bonded labor, when you're forced because of your economic situation, then there is a protection from that abuse in our constitution. Now, Article 39F talks about right to equal opportunities. That is per se very clear, because you have to give everyone equal opportunities, no matter from what part of the society or what level of society they come from. Now, right to early childhood care and education. That is also very important for children, because children are to be given care and education. Why should you give them care? Because they are small and they're vulnerable, and at a stage like this, they have to grow to become good human beings, and you have to give them care and developmental aspects. You have to help them with all that. That is what is Article 45. Now, Article 45 also asks to give compulsory education. Okay, this has to be read with Article 21A, fundamental right to education, which was added very recently, as I mentioned earlier. Now, what does Article 46 say? Article 46 talks about rights of weaker sections of the society. And Article 47 talks about right to nutrition and standard of living. This is basically to improve the health of children, and they have to be not just children, everyone, because we're talking about children, let's just mention their aspect. They have to have a good standard of living so that they have a healthy life. Now, the last one is a fundamental duty. Fundamental duty, the duty that you have towards the state. So what is the duty that is related to child right that you have towards the state? A parent or a guardian has a duty to provide opportunities for education to his child 6 to 14 years. A parent or guardian, no matter what, has to give education, opportunities for education to his child who's between the age of 6 to 14 years. So you have a duty to give education to your child. Now, let's go into the most important aspect or the most important thing we are going to talk about today. So what is it? It is the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Child, UNCRC. So what's CRC? As I have mentioned earlier, laws have to be written down, right? Only then you can go somewhere and ask for its, when you're an aggrieved person, when your rights have been taken away, if you go to court, only if these things are written down and these are solid, hard laws, you will be able to go and ask for it. Now, let's see how child rights developed, okay? So I will tell you the story of this lady called Eglantine Jebb, okay? So she was a woman. So let's all be proud that it was a woman who started the whole concept of child rights. She sowed the seeds of declaration that we are going to talk about. In the year 1923, she founded an organization called Save the Children. And Jebb mentioned the rights of the child should be especially protected and enforced, and thus she helped in the drafting of the first stipulations for child rights. So it is from that concept of Eglantine Jebb that we came into the concept of child rights, and she made a basic draft, and all the declarations or the conventions that we see today are an improvised version of the same. So we have to thank that woman for such a bold step. Now, let's see how it evolved. Let's start from Geneva Declaration of the Rights of the Child. No, that came in the year 1924. And that is a declaration, okay? It was later on endorsed by League of Nations. What is League of Nations? League of Nations was an organization that was formed before United Nations, UN, United Nations Organization. So at that time, only League of Nations was there, and League of Nations endorsed this declaration, which laid down the basic rights of the child. Later on in 1948, when United Nations organization was formed, they put out a universal declaration of human rights. That declaration mentioned all the human rights for everybody, all the human beings, including children. They had mentioned that. And later on, the Geneva Declaration was adopted and extended and made into a new declaration called Declaration of the Rights of Child in 1959. Now, then came a lot of other covenants, and later on in the year 1989, Convention on the Rights of Child was formed. Now, why is Convention on the Rights of Child important? Convention on the Rights of Child. First, if you have noticed, if you have listened, you would have noticed that till now I have been saying the word declaration. And now suddenly in 1989, it has been made into a word convention. Convention. Why is it so? Because declaration and convention are two different things. Declaration means it's a guideline, it's a set of principles, and it is not binding. It is not binding for the state parties to, it is like soft law, as I mentioned earlier. You can't go and fight for it. It is just an obligation to listen to these declaration articles. Whereas a convention is more solid. It is a legal instrument that is hard. So when this convention was formed, almost all nations then ratified it. Ratified means they signed and became a part of it. They agreed to be a part of Convention of Child Rights. They agreed to everything mentioned in the convention articles, except for one state, which is a surprising thing, which would be surprising for all of you. The only state that has not ratified the convention is the United States of America. They have some basic issues with the convention, and they have not ratified the convention yet. Now, let's go to, before we go into the different articles of the convention, let's just see what are the 3 ways of monitoring. Simply make law and making it available to everyone and saying, okay, there's this law, so let's just follow it. That's not enough. The institution or the organization that is making the law should always monitor the same, right? When you're taking a class, when you're teaching children, you don't teach them everything and just leave them to be on their own and decide everything. You monitor, you look at it. How are they following what you're teaching? Are they getting it? Are they getting the point? You ask them to bring back their work, you check it, you give them back again, you give the work back to them, you ask them to make corrections. A similar process is done at UNCRC too. And how do they do it? They do it in a 3-step process, okay? 3 ways, not step, 3 ways. The first one is, there is a committee. There is a UN Committee on the Rights of Child, which is a body of experts that monitor and report on the implementation of CRC. So what does this committee do? This committee monitors and reports on a periodic basis what has been done and how are states implementing these policies. Are the states doing their work properly? Are they doing something that is against the CRC, against the articles rights mentioned in CRC? Then they give a report of this to the UN, who the committee gives a report to the UN. Now, the second one of monitoring is individuals can appeal to the committee for violation of their rights. Individuals can go to the committee. Now, the third one is a committee initiative. That means committee, if they have reliable information, can take a problem on its own and look into that matter. Okay, so that is the 3 ways of monitoring how the CRC is being followed by states. Now, let's go into the articles. Now, the article of UNCRC is divided into 4 parts. Right to survival, right to development, right to participation, and right to protection. So what is right to survival? Right to survival is nothing but, as I mentioned earlier, is a right to life. And I had explained to you what right to life was. So survive, live, survive. So survival rights are right to live and get all the basic needs that you require, like nutrition, shelter, adequate living, standard access to medical services, etc. Okay, now right to development. What is right to development? To develop as a good human being. What do you require for that? You have a right to education. You have a right to have support for, as I mentioned earlier, childhood care and education is crucial for development. So you have to have that. Then most important for children to develop that most of us forget is they need rest and leisure and play. All children should play. Only if they play, they will mentally and physically develop and become good human beings. So recreation and cultural activities are also very important. Now, next is rights to participation. What do you mean by right to participation? Right to participation means children have a freedom. They have freedom to express their opinions and to have a say in matters. We generally have this tendency to tell to our children, keep quiet. This is not the time for you to talk. This is for us to decide. Sometimes it's true that it's time for us to decide, but if you think about it, most of the time, when something is happening, don't you think that the life of the child is also involved? I'm not asking you to let the child take a decision of a major development, but you should make them understand that their decision, their participation is also valued. Sometimes you will be surprised. They will have to say a lot of important things. Now, the last one is protection. Protection from abuse, protection from violation of rights, protection from exploitation, etc. Now, let's quickly go into the different aspects of the rights mentioned in UNCRC. So UNCRC, as I mentioned earlier in the beginning, first article talks about the definition of child. Now, what does the second article talk about? Second article talks about discrimination. What do you mean by discrimination? You are not supposed to discriminate any child on the basis of where they come from, where they live, who they are, what languages they speak, what their religion is, how they think, what they look like, if that person is a boy or a girl, that person has a disability, that child is rich or poor, as I mentioned earlier, and no matter who their parents are. And as teachers, at every step, you will have to make sure that you don't discriminate children based on any of this. Everyone should be equal in your eyes. Now, the third one is the best interest of the child. What do you mean by best interest of the child? It means that when adults make decisions, they should think about how their decision will affect the children. And all adults should do what is best for the child. And governments should make sure that the children are protected and looked after by their parents or by other people when this is needed. Governments should also make sure that people and places responsible for the children, looking after the children, are doing a proper work. They are doing a decent job. Okay? Now, what does Article 4 say? Article 4 says making the rights real. That means the governments should make sure that every child in their country can enjoy all the rights mentioned in this convention. So the government has a duty to give all the children the rights mentioned in this convention. Now, next one is family guidance as children develop. As we have been talking about how important it is to give guidance to children, CRC also specifically mentions that the governments should let families and communities guide their children so that they grow up, they learn to use these rights, and they grow, because as they grow, they will need less guidance. So you keep on giving them guidance, make them prepared for the world they're going to see when they grow up. Now, the sixth one is life survival and development. That means the children have a right to be alive, right to survive, and right to develop in the best possible way. Now, the next article is Article 7. Article 7 talks about name and nationality. It's clear from the words written down here that it means that every child must be registered when they are born and should be given a name. To have a name is the right of a child. And the child should also have a nationality. Means they are officially recognized by a government. Next one is identity. Article 8, which says that there should be, the child has a right to have an official record of who they are. All of us have an identity card, right? So that is a right. As a parent, you're supposed to give that to your child. Now let's go to the next set. Next set says Article 9, which says keeping families together. Now, what do you mean by keeping families together? Yes. You can come up if you have some doubts.
Prevent being separated to the extent possible from
Like,
the parents.
Migrants will be there. For example, in US and all Mexican migrants, the children are separated from their parents.
Yes. I don't understand. Please, can you repeat the question? So what is the...
that is keeping families together. That is that is what you were asking, right? Families together.
No, I was just asking. I thought you had some doubts, so I was just clarifying. Okay, so I'll continue. Yeah, keeping families together. Yes, keeping families together means what? It means they should not be separated from their parents. You know how important it is for a child to be with his or her parents, unless they're not being properly looked after. If your parents become your enemies, then it's better that we remove the child from that position where he or she is being exploited by the parents. That is, when your parents are the people who are supposed to give the rights and they become people who violate the right, then the child has to be removed from that situation. Okay. So, but they will try and see that children are not separated from their parents unless it's extremely required for this growth that it is to be done. Now, contact with parents across countries. That means if a child lives in a different country than their parents, government must let the child and parents travel so that they can stay in contact with each other. Okay. Now, protecting from kidnapping. What do you mean by that? So protection from kidnapping is, as the heading states, it's protecting children from being taken out. Okay, they can't be. They have to be protected from being taken out of a country. Okay, for example, being kidnapped and things like that. Now, 12, respect for children's views. Very important. Children have the right to give their opinions freely and on issues affecting them. Okay, doesn't mean your child will come and tell random things about things you are deciding. That's not what I'm saying. When it's something that's affecting the children, as I mentioned earlier, you have to give them at least the right to participate in a conversation. Don't just push them away. They will have something to tell you. Now, next thing is Article 14, means freedom of thought and religion. Article 14, Article 13, I missed out Article 13, which talks about sharing thoughts freely. Sharing thoughts freely means children have to share their thoughts freely. Okay, what they think by anything. They can draw pictures, they can write, they can talk. In any way, they can express their feeling. They have a right to do that. Okay. Now, Article 14 says children can choose their own thoughts, opinion, and religion. Parents can guide their children, but we can't force them to do things. They also have their right to choose. But we should be able to make them understand and guide them. Okay. Now, Article 15. Article 15 says that children have a right to set up or join groups. Okay. As long as it does not harm others. They can't go and join some group which has a bad purpose. They can't make groups for bad purposes. Only if it's not affecting other person's right, or if it is not bad in the sense it doesn't harm people, then they can set up groups or join groups. Now, protection of privacy is Article 16. Protection of privacy means every child has a right to privacy. The law must protect children's privacy, family, home, communications, and reputation from any attack. Like all of us, even children have a right to being protected from privacy violations. Now let's go to the next slide. So the next slide talks about access to information, meaning what children have a right to get information from different sources, as you can get from the picture, books, newspapers, television, internet, radio. They have a right to get information from all these, okay? And as adults, we should make sure that the information they are getting is not harmful. We shouldn't make that child into a, someone who shouldn't make them a fanatic by giving unnecessary information. What is required, what is ideal for their age, we have to give them a space. And also, governments should encourage media to share more information through TV and through radio, through newspapers. Children should be given more information about things that are useful to them. Now, what is Article 18? This is one of the most important articles because it's talking about the responsibility as a parent. As a parent, you're responsible for bringing up your child. When the child does not have any parents, another adult will have the responsibility and they can be called a guardian. Parents and guardians should always consider what is best for their child, and governments should help them to make sure that they're bringing up their children well. Now, when the child has both parents, father and mother, both of them should be responsible for bringing up child. And there are situations when the child has only one parent. In that situation, that particular parent is responsible for bringing up the child. And when there is a father and mother, both are responsible. And government should also help you and aid you in bringing up your child. Now, Article 19 talks about protection from violence. Protection from violence means children cannot be abused. Children cannot be, used. Okay, you should not use violence against children. Very important, because you cannot harm a child. You cannot hit a child. You should not hit children. It is not how to punish. Punishment is a word that has to be carefully used. You should make them understand their mistake and correct it. That should be the punishment. When they understand the mistake, the guilty feeling that they have inside them, that is the punishment. Not hitting them, beating them, pushing them, pinching them, all sorts of punishment that is generally seen in our country. That is not how you should punish children. They have to understand the mistake they have made and correct it. That should be the way all of us should use. Okay, so they have to be protected from violence. Now, what happens to children without families are being mentioned in Article 20, which says that every child who cannot be looked after by their own family has the right to be looked after properly by people who respect their religion, culture, language, and other aspects. Okay, if you don't have a father or mother, the person who is going to look after you should respect your views and your upbringing up until then. Now, children who are adopted. What happens to children who are adopted? They should be adopted, and you should take care that they are adopted by people who are best for them. If a child cannot be properly looked after in their own country, for example, by living with another family, then they might be adopted in another country. So maximum you should try, and if there is an adoption procedure going, you should try and adopt a child from your own country so that it's the same culture, same bringing up that happens. But if you have no option, like in the sense if there's a child who is not able to get enough development from that country and needs somebody's help, in such a case, yes, you can go overseas and go for an adoption from overseas. Now, 22 talks about refugee children. What does refugee children Why is it important? It's important that children who move from their home country to another country as refugees, because it's not safe for them to stay in their country, should get help and protection and have the same rights as a child born in that country. So if there is a refugee child that is coming into your country, you should not regard him as a refugee. He should not be given that status and pushed away, should not be pushed away from others. He should also be treated like any other child in your country. Now, Article 23 talks about children with disabilities, which basically means that you should give them all the possible help so that they don't feel that they have a disability. They can develop and have best possible life in the society. And government should remove all the obstacles for these children and try and make their life more easier. Okay. Now, Article 24 talks about health, water, food, and environment. Meaning, children have the right to the best healthcare, clean water, healthy food, and a clean and safe environment to live in. And all adults and children should have information about how to stay safe and healthy. If you notice, our government puts out notifications, put out circulars regarding health, right? During the pandemic, we used to see ads, we used to see certain information being put out by government. Why are they doing it? They're making us aware of what is to be done so that we can live a healthy life. It's a duty of the state to do that. Now, the next set of articles about reviewing of a child's placement, meaning that if a child has been put or has been taken away and put in a place because of a child's health, then that child has to be checked regularly. You can just like that, don't put them and go away. That is not the process. You have to check regularly what is happening to the child, how the system is helping the child. Now, the next one is Article 26 talking about social and economic help. Meaning, governments should provide money or other support to help children from poor families. Article 27 talks about food, clothing, and safe home. Food, clothing, and safe home are basic requirements of a child, and the children have a right to all these in the best possible way. Like a child can't ask for the best thing in the world. He can only ask for what his parents can afford. And in that concept, inside whatever limitations that parent has, a good parent will always give these basic things to the child. Now, the child under Article 28 also has a right to access to education. Child has a right to an education. Primary education should be made free. Secondary and higher education should be made available to every child, and children should be encouraged to go to school to the highest level possible. As I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of the rate of dropouts in our country is very high. So if you see some child who has dropped out of school, don't just walk away. Try and say something to encourage that child to go back to school. We have a duty. We have a duty to do that. Okay. Now, Article 29 talks about aim of education. What are the aims of education? Education is to help children develop their personalities, talents, and abilities. It should teach them to understand their own rights, respect other people, respect other people's culture and differences, and help them live life peacefully and to protect the environment. As teachers, you have to understand what is the aim of the education. Is it to teach everything that is given in the textbook by heart? No. The main aim of education is to make them understand that they have to respect everyone. Why are you teaching them science? So that they respect what is happening, so that they understand what is happening, so that they understand how important it is to take care of the environment, take care of plants, animals, how important it is. So those are the aims of education. Now we go to Article 30. What does Article 30 say? Article 30 says that minority culture, language, and religion have to be taken into consideration. Meaning, children have a right to use their own language, culture, and religion, even if these are not shared by most people in the country where they live in. Even if the people around him can't talk that language, he should be allowed to do that. It's basic freedom. Now, Article 31, very important, says that every child has a right to rest, play, involved in culture and arts. Okay, you have to give your children playtime, relaxation time, venues to develop culturally and, improve their artistic talents. Let them grow, give them colors, let them paint, let them express themselves, let them grow and develop. So those are the things mentioned in Article 31. Now, what does Article 32 say? Article 32 says that children are protected from harmful work. No child should be engaged in harmful work that is harmful for them. Okay? Talking about child labor. Okay? It's prohibited. Now, the next set of articles talk about protection from harmful drugs. Protection from harmful drugs in the sense government must protect children from taking, making, carrying, or selling harmful drugs. Children should not be engaged in any of these activities. They shouldn't eat it, they shouldn't take it, they shouldn't sell it, they shouldn't make it, they should not even carry it. Now, protection from sexual abuse. It's basically protecting children from sexual exploitation, being taken advantage of, forcing children to have sex for money, to make sexual pictures of them, pornography, post into pornography. All these things, children have to be protected. They are vulnerable. You have to take care of your child. You have to make sure that you don't create a situation where the child is exposed to these things. Now, Article 35 talks about prevention of sale and trafficking. You cannot sell or you cannot buy, a child for money. Not allowed. No, that's not. You can't do trafficking of children. You cannot kidnap a child and sell that child. That's not allowed. Now, protection from exploitation. What do you mean by protection from exploitation? Meaning they have to be protected from all other kinds of exploitation. Whatever is not mentioned in this article, any other kind of exploitation where they're taken advantage of, they have to be protected. Now, children in detention. Very important. Children who are accused of breaking law, they shouldn't be killed, they shouldn't be tortured, they shouldn't be treated cruelly. See, we have heard of a story, umpteen times we've heard of a story of a boy, hungry boy, stealing bread and running away. And we've seen different versions of the same, but we have never, it is good to see how to deal with it. They made a mistake, right? They are still children. They're not adults. So they should be given a chance to come back into the society, to be rehabilitated. Okay, you should not push them to the jail, into the jail. Jail should be only the last option. Okay. Now, protection from war. Article 38. Protection from war. Article 38 says that children have the right to be protected during war. No child under age of 15 years can join army. Okay. Now, Article 39 says recovery and reintegration, which says children have a right to get help if they have been hurt, neglected, treated badly, or affected by war, so that they can get back into health and dignity. So a child in war has to be helped to be reintegrated into the society. Now, 40th one, children who break law. Children accused of breaking the law have a right to legal help and fair treatment. There should be lots of solutions to help these children become good members of the society. And as I mentioned earlier, prison should only be the last choice. Now we come to the last articles of UNCRC, which says, Article 41, that best law for children applies. Meaning, if the law of the country protects children better than this convention, then that law should apply. In India, if there is some law that states that or protects children in a better way than CRC, then that law should apply. Now, Article 42 says, Everyone must know children's rights. It's important that children's rights are made aware. People are made aware of children's rights so that they can ask for it. Okay. Now, Article 43 to 54 is about how the convention works. And as I mentioned earlier about monitoring, the United Nations Committee for Child Rights, all those comes under how the convention works. Now when we are done with CRC, we have an idea as to what these rights are. Now we know what are the rights children have. Children have a right to life. Children have a right to be protected against violence, protected from sexual abuse. They have a right to play. They have a right to leisure. They have a right to talk freely, express freely, paint, color, etc. Okay. Now they have a right against violence. Forgot that important right. Yeah. And now when we come to India, as I mentioned earlier, there are three sources of rights that I'm going to mention. The first one was Constitution. Second one was CRC, United Nations Convention on the Rights of Child. Now the third one is laws in India for children. It means that in India, there are different laws which in one way or the other, talks about the child or rights for the child. So as you can see, there are this is a comprehensive list of all the laws you can see from 2020 to from 1890 to 2020. There are laws made in India, acts, rules, regulations made in India, and they have been amended, improvised, and made more, acceptable, and included more provisions. And a lot of changes have happened, and there are a lot of laws here that talks about rights of a child. Okay, since it's a very wide topic and I cannot go in detail into each and every one of these laws, I can tell you about the five, according to me, the five most important laws that deals with children in India. Okay, so let's just go into the first one. Okay, the first one, and also very important thing that I mentioned is, along with these laws, there is also a list of policies brought about by our government, by different ministries for the growth of children. And one of the policies, most recent one in 2013, National Policy for Children, is the most important one that you all have to remember. This policy aims to protect and encourage the rights of children for survival, health, nutrition, education, development, protection, and participation. Okay, so that is the most important policy that you have to keep in mind. Okay, now as we go into the five most important laws, is first one, Juvenile Justice, Care and Protection of Children Act of 2015. It's commonly known as JJ Act. JJ Act is a major legal text on child protection in India, and it replaced the Indian Juvenile Delinquency Law, Juvenile Justice, Care and Protection of Act. Okay, that is the new act. It replaced the old act of 2000. That was the old act was in 2000. This replaced the old act. Okay. Now, what does this act say? It allows for juveniles in conflict with law. What do you mean by juveniles in conflict with law? We don't say accused. We don't say that that person, that child did the crime. We call them juveniles in conflict with law. Look how careful law is. We don't want to hurt the child, right? If the child commits a mistake, we should understand that. Make the child understand that. Bring the child back into the society. Reform the child. Make him understand his mistake. Bring him back into the society. Okay? So that is what this act is for. They cannot be treated like adults. So a separate act has to be made to say how you should treat a child when a child commits a crime. That is Juvenile Justice Act. Okay? Now, why was the act changed in the year 2015? What is so important? As I have mentioned earlier, during Nirbhaya case, we saw what happened to one of the accused who was a minor. So the major change that came in this act in 2015 was that they added a provision saying that children in the age group of 16 to 18 who is involved in heinous offenses, bad, very bad, extremely bad offenses, can be tried as adults. So if you think that their mind has matured to think about a concept and commit that crime with that level of maturity, then they can be tried as adults in the age group of 16 to 18. That is the major change that was made. Now, the act also sought to create a universally acceptable adoption law in India. In India, adoption laws were in different statutes. For example, Hindu Adoption Maintenance Act, Guardians and Wards Act. That is still there. This has not replaced them, but it has brought everything under one umbrella and has given a universal law for adoption in India. And this act also guarantees security, protection, education, and well-being of children in need in India. Okay, children in need doesn't mean children who have committed crime. Children who don't have access to things, who don't have parents, who needs care from the government. This act also mentions what is to be done with them and how should be placed, how are they to be placed in a children's home, etc. Okay, I hope you're clear with Juvenile Justice Act. Now, protection of children from sexual, yes. Okay, I'll continue. Protection of Children from Sexual Offences Act. Very important act called POCSO. P-O-C-S-O, POCSO. This is an act that came in 2012 to curb sexual crimes and offences done against children. And this act was introduced by the Ministry of Women and Child Development. This gives out a comprehensive set of laws to protect children from sexual abuse, pornography, harassment. Now, it provides for children with easier yet effective judicial procedure and child-friendly mechanism for reporting, investigating, evidence collecting, etc. You have to understand that if such a sad thing happens to a child, the child is in a very fragile state. The child has to be taken care of now very different from an adult. Even an adult at this stage has to be taken care in a particular way because they are mentally shattered. So just think of a child. You have to be very careful when you take care of a child who has been involved in a sexual offense, or a sexual offense has been committed towards the child. So there are a lot of important points that has been mentioned in this act about how children have to be taken care of when such a crime is mentioned. For example, like when a police officer is recording the statement of a child, he or she should not be in the uniform. The child shouldn't be scared to talk openly about it. Then the child should always be asked questions at his or her home. Okay, and don't think this law only applies to women, or girl child. This law applies to both boys and girls. Crime can be committed towards both boys and girls. It need not be committed only towards girls. Okay, so a child who has been in this sad position is treated carefully, and this act aids to that. Okay, and let's go to the next act. Very important, Right to Education Act, RT of 2009. Now, the 83rd Amendment of the Constitution. One good thing about our Constitution is, even though it was made in 1950, it is a dynamic instrument. It is not, if they had made Constitution in 1950 and kept it there without any changes, there would not have been any growth, any development in our country. We would still be thinking in that 1950 constitutional way. A constitution is supposed to evolve with the evolution of a state. The state becomes the only thing people say the only thing that is constant in your life is change, right? Similarly, Constitution also, there are basic things that should remain the same. Nobody has a right to change that. Those are called the basic structure. And those have to be remained, those have to remain in the same way. But new changes, good things have to be added. One such thing is Right to Education Act, which gives free and compulsory education to children from the age group of 6 to 14. Okay. Now, they say that 25% reservation for economically disadvantaged communities in admission to class 1 in all private school has to be kept, all private schools. And then they say about school infrastructure, how important it is to be improved. Okay. And financial burden should be shared by the state and center regarding education, not just up to the center to give free education to all children. It's up to the state also to set up good schools, good public schools for children to go and attend and study. Now, very important for teachers, this act prohibits physical punishment and mental harassment under section 17(1) and makes it a punishable offense under section 17(2). So that is where it clearly states that you cannot physically punish or mentally harass a child. Now let's go into the next act, which is Prohibition of Child Marriage. What is Prohibition of Child Marriage Act? As I mentioned earlier, 1/3 of the world's child brides come from India. Even though it is prohibited in our country, even though there is a clear law which gives out penalties to people who solemnize that, which gives, penal provisions against those people, still it's rampant. The objective of the act, this act is to prohibit solemnization of marriage, child marriage, and incidental matters, connected matters, to ensure that child marriage is eradicated from within the society. And it replaced the old Child Marriage Restraint Act of 1929, armed with enabling provisions to prohibit for child marriage, protect and provide relief to victims, and enhance punishment for those who abet, promote, or solemnize marriage. You're not going to be, don't think that only the child who's being married or who's being put into that institution will be punished. Anybody who will help them, abet them, promote this marriage, and solemnize the same will be punished. Now, it also the appointment of a child marriage prohibition officer for implementing this act. Now, the last act I'm going to talk about is Child and Adolescent Labor Prohibition and Regulation Act of 1986. Now, when this act was there, in the beginning, when the act was there, it was called Child Labor Prohibition and Regulation Act. And it clearly mentioned that children who are 14 years, or children below 14 years of age cannot work. They are completely prohibited from working except for helping family or family enterprise, or an artist, probably somebody who's acting in a movie or anything, working after the school hours. Okay, so why I'm saying this is, this doesn't mean that a child cannot help their parents at their house, or cannot help them with their laundry, or help them clean the house. That is not the meaning. It means the child should not go and work for money, should not be forced into an employment. Okay, and what change did the Act 2016 amendment bring to this act? The change that it brought was the age group of children 14 to 18 are called adolescents. Adolescent period, children, they can work, but not in a hazardous process or occupation. Now, what is hazardous process or occupation? And there is a list given in the act which says what are these hazardous process or occupations, which is mines, inflammable substances, industries that involve inflammable substances, and hazardous processes. Okay, that is, in such occupation, children from 14 to 18 cannot work. So if you notice, there is a small change compared to convention and Indian child labor laws. Now, this act also talks about rehabilitation. If at all a child goes into child labor, the rehabilitation of children and adolescents who have been victims is also important. Okay, so they have to be brought back into the society where they'll be able to live and develop freely. It also gives penalty and imprisonment, which has been increased and is up to 50,000 rupees and up to 2 years and fine. Fine is 50,000 rupees up to, okay, which can vary. Now, these are all the important things, laws that talk about child rights. Now, when I tell you about all these things, we have to understand all these rights are there. And we as adults or caregivers, parents or teachers, we have a duty towards these children. They have a right, we have a corresponding duty. And we are supposed to give this to children. We are supposed to help them grow. Most of the time, what I see in my perspective is that we usually close our eyes to most of the things happening in the society. Now, at times you have to interfere. You have to help a child if you think that child is in trouble. Especially teachers. They see children on a daily basis. They interact with them and they will quickly be able to understand if a child is in trouble. The child becomes withdrawn. The child doesn't talk properly. A smart child, for some reason, suddenly stops talking, suddenly stops expressing, suddenly stops being attentive. A teacher will be able to recognize that. So as teachers, you should understand that you have an important task of realizing if there is an issue, if there is a violation of a right, and you should help those children. And also one point that I would like to say is that there is something called a child helpline. Okay, and the number in India is 1098. Okay, I'll just stop sharing my screen and we'll get back into the class. Yes, so what I was saying is there is a helpline in India and the number is 1098. And the helpline is, you know for what? It's for you or anybody to call to report anything regarding a child. It's the world's largest 24-hour telephonic help service that is accessible to anyone in our country. And it works for children in distress. Remember this, the number is 1098. Okay, you can call them and your call will be answered by a trained contact officer. Okay, and you can report what is happening. If you want to say something that you have seen, some violation that you have seen, you can do that. And if there is a problem, if a child is coming to you with a problem, be very open to the problem, understand the child's problem, and probably you will think, what can I do? How will I be able to help them? You will be able to help them. You will be able to understand their problem. Listen, because you are an adult, right? You have gone through a lot of, you have also come from being a child. You have grown up into an adult. So you will have experience to guide them. First of all, be confident that you can help them. You will be able to help them. Okay? Thank you. And that was my class.
Wow. Thank you.
It was really great.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Oh, thank you, Arati.
Wow,
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you
Yes.
so much.
And now if you have any doubt, if it's something that I can help you with, you can ask me. I will probably spend 5 to 10 minutes on that if you have any doubt.
Regarding the yesterday's, what happened yesterday on the POCSO case, the Supreme Court Chief Justice S.A. Bobde, what he told in the POCSO case that he asked the accused if he can marry the girl whom he abused, he will allow him for a bail or something like that. He's a government employee as well. Does the law give such a provision for a Chief Justice to ask such a question?
Okay. Very valid question. Okay. Now, as I was mentioning earlier, every law is written down and there are certain things mentioned in that. And you should understand that each judge is an individual person. Okay, he'll have his own interpretation of the law. I can guarantee that there is nothing mentioned in the law that states that if that person marries that girl, he can be, taken out of the crime. No, absolutely no. You have committed a crime, you will have to deal with it. That is for sure according to the law. I'm talking about the law. Okay. Now, what a particular judge says, first of all, we should understand that we don't know what has happened in that case or in depth what is happening there. Okay, and each person has their own, interpretation of the law. Okay, that is what that judge must have interpreted. You might have a different opinion, but I can clearly tell you there is nothing in the law that states that if you marry that girl, you will be exonerated, you will be taken away from that offense. You will be punished no matter what is mentioned in the law. Now, how much we can question this is another aspect of law. If you think a person, let it be a judge, let it be a police officer, anybody who's supposed to give you a right, who's taking away that right from you, anybody, any citizen has a right to go to court. Nobody is stopping you from going to court. If you think that that person, what he did is wrong, you can go to the court, ask for that right. Okay? You can't do one more thing. When something is happening, you can't interfere in something in between. You won't be able to make a change. Let that process end and then go for your grievances. Go ask for what you want, your right. As I mentioned earlier, it's clearly said that you have rights and you can ask for that. So you can go and ask. Okay, I hope you understood what I said.
Ma'am, thank you so much. Yeah, it's clear for me. So we can go if we think it is wrong.
Yes, if you think anybody, for that matter, a judge or anybody, any law, if you think you have an absolute right to go and ask for a remedy. Okay, because simply writing down rules is not enough. I am giving you this right, I'm giving you this right. You have that right. That is not enough. You should have a mechanism to go and ask for that right if your right is being violated, right? That is, if you buy a product, how is it if you buy one product, it will be written in that, right? Sometimes it will be clearly written that we are not liable for some things. That means you cannot come with that question. You cannot go and say, okay, I drank this thing and I got some tummy pain. So no, if you get tummy pain or if you have a problem, if it is written in that, okay, fine. But if it's not written, you can actually go and ask. Right? Yeah, so that's about it. So anyone else? Yes, anyone has any doubt?
Ma'am, can I ask one question?
Yes, sure.
1 second. Okay. Each child has a different mental strength, right? Some are very emotionally weak, some are emotionally strong. So how can we say that, okay, the teacher harassed the child mentally? Because for some, if we just raise the voice itself, it becomes a harassment. Right?
Don't raise the voice.
But that is not possible as teachers. Sometimes to manage the class, we might have to raise our voice. But
yes, I will tell you.
Okay.
Yes. You have more questions?
No, ma'am. Same thing. Some children are mentally very strong, so they won't feel that.
No, that is a very important question you asked. And I'm afraid I have to say that your understanding regarding that, all of us have to change that understanding. It is not okay to raise your voice. It is not okay. It is not right that you raise your voice. I know I'm a parent. I know how important it is to raise your voice at times to make them understand. It is very important that sometimes children do certain really, when they do really bad things, which you have to correct immediately, your first reaction is to raise your voice. No, you should not do that. Especially teachers. If you scream, probably the first time they will stop. You scream 3 times, 4th time you will have to scream even louder for them to stop.
I'm not saying that we are shouting at the child. sometimes
I understood. You're talking about sometimes you should use a stern voice.
Yes, stern voice. Or maybe we may, with some children, for example, of course, punishments, physical, we are now, nobody is doing physical punishment, but sometimes we ask the child to stand up or a timeout is given, which is.
Oh, yeah. So you are saying for some children that is fine, but for some children it is not.
Yes, some take it as a very mental stress for that. So how can we judge which is mental harassment, which is
actually, you know, we can only say a general concept. Okay. For example, if there is a problem with one child, if you just told becoming very sad, it's mentally affecting him, that means he is not being supported. I say he's having, there is some inherent issue there. Okay, a child, if you, and it also depends on the punishment. Okay, ma'am. So what I'm saying is, if there is a child whom you see is very quiet, who takes these punishments very seriously, means you have to support them more, make them speak out more, make them more, you know, independent in their thinking, encourage them to talk, and make them more brave. Okay, you can, there is no particular way in which you should give a punishment.
Yeah. Because, you know, nowadays teachers are, teacher fear to correct the child. They're thinking if they do something, they will bring with some police complaint. So teachers are thinking, okay, let whatever it may be, it is not my concern. So in many ways.
No, they can't give police complaint for each and everything. No. What is required for the child, the guidance and what I say is the correct guidance is to be given by the parent or the teacher. You can't go to the police office, police station for each and everything that a teacher does. Basically, don't scream, don't hit the child. Those are two major violations. And mental harassment depends on each case. See, one thing you have to understand is, when any law gives someone right, that right can be misused, no matter what. For example, how many times have we seen that sexual harassment cases have been misused by women? It is made for the protection of women, but we have seen cases where women make up stuff and, you know, make up harassment claims, right? So any right that is made will have a part where people will misuse it. That you can't blame the law, you can't blame the system for that, because system can't look into each and every child and make a law.
Yes.
System can only give a general thing. And as teachers, the only thing that you can do is, you can stay strong, you can stay truthful to your words and actions. If you are doing the same thing to all the children, I'm not saying hit the children and hit everyone. I'm saying truthful actions towards all the children, then you will not be, they will not go to police station for harassment.
For example, one of the girl, she was writing the exam and she was caught for copying malpractice. And when the principal caught her, she jumped from the third floor building. So in such cases, the teachers or the principal or the supervisor becomes the victim, right?
That is a very interesting concept. Okay, I'll tell you what I can say about it. If you find a child is committing a crime, okay, as I mentioned earlier, you have to take care of it in a very particular, careful way. You shouldn't go and right away nip that and then just pull him away, and you should say, okay, you have been caught. Make him understand that he did a mistake. Now you will be escorted back to this thing. And in between that, if the child is going and doing something, it is not this person's fault. It's not at all this person's fault. He or she has done his or her duty. But sometimes what happens is, when the child is being taught, the child gets insulted. The child probably, oh, what are you? They will use bad words. They will say, your future is gone. You have done that. You will be debarred. Yes. First of all, you just take the child to a safe place, away from the place where the child has committed the crime. Make he or she, if it's a boy, he, if it's a girl, she understand that they have committed a crime and what will be the consequences. Okay, and make sure that you constantly give the child attention, because that is a time when they are vulnerable. They might do whatever. You go and sit, you can't just say, go and sit there, I will come there. No, you don't know what the child is going to do. So it's always better somebody accompanies that child.
Yes.
And despite that, the child is running away and going and jumping from a building, I don't think anybody can. Yes, despite that, that is not the issue of the person who's accompanied.
Yeah, so even as you said, even if the child commits something wrong, we have to be very careful in dealing with that.
Very careful. I was talking about Juvenile Justice Act and how important it is to make sure that these children are treated carefully.
I hope my trainee teachers are listening to this point. No screaming, no punishment in the class.
See, there is punishment. You know what? When you call out a child's name and say, why were you talking in the class, or why were you not listening? That itself is a punishment for small children. They will be insulted by that itself. They will be so sad by that itself. Okay, today my teacher called my name. So that is enough. You don't have to hit them, or you don't have to then say, why don't you listen? You're a good child. You can just say, why don't you listen? You're a good child. You always listen in class. One thing I've noticed with my daughter that works 100% of the time is, you say, give confidence to the child, to the right thing the child will do. If my daughter is doing, or if a small child is doing something, what I try and tell the child is, oh, that is a really good thing. It will be nice if you can do it like that.
Like that, yeah.
So you will not believe the child will do it. If the child is watching TV and you're asking the child to stop watching TV, what will you say? You'll say, you take the remote, you switch off the TV, you just scream at the child. Instead of that, just give the child 2 minutes. Tell the child, I'm going to switch off the TV in 2 minutes. You can say bye to the TV or something like that. Okay, I will come and switch it off in 2 minutes. You will see that if either she or she will let you switch off the TV, or you can switch off the TV and then you can just say, tell to the child, that is my daughter, or that is my son, that is my student. Very good. You will see a positive change in the child. If you scream at the child will scream at you. That is for sure.
Yes.
Yes, any more doubts?
Yes, ma'am. The continuing with this scenario, as we were talking with, don't you think that these are affecting the morality of the society, as the teachers are not able to open their mouth to correct the child when they're doing mistakes?
No, I don't agree to that, ma'am. Why is because correcting a child can happen in a different way also, which was what I was saying 2 minutes back. You don't have to use corporal punishment to correct the child. Child can be corrected. First, let's believe in ourselves. Let's believe that we can do it. You teachers first start believing that you will be able to control the child. If you go to a room, I know it's not easy. I've also gone to schools. I was also a student once, and I used to scream and play and run around in the class. But instead of screaming at them, give them some time to settle down and give them more time to understand the situation and let them correct themselves. You give them the guidance, they will do it. And punishments, as I said, punishments need not be beating, and you can ask them probably to write in a piece of paper, I am sorry, or some, I don't know whether you can do that. I'm not sure whether you can do that, but probably it is always better not to, make them do something. It's always better to make them understand their mistake rather than making them do something.
Even though, ma'am, if the child is doing some mistake, I've seen, no, I've been working the past, worked in school for the 3 years. Then I have seen some children doing the mistake, and yet parents supporting those mistakes and bringing complaint against teachers, as the teachers are correcting the child for what he has done. So how you can justify that, ma'am?
That is like saying sometimes when some crime is committed and the government supports it, you can't do anything because some things happen like that. If such a situation happens, first thing you can do is call for a meeting with the parents without the child. Okay, then you sit and talk to that parent. What has happened? Okay, clearly make that parent understand what the child has done and what are the consequences of that. Okay, if the child has hit someone, let's say the child has hit someone, what could have happened? Okay, if something like that would have happened, would have been a criminal case or something like that. You see, no, you understand, no? It can aggravate and can become a bigger issue. You should make the parents be aware of that. First of all, some parents will not even let you speak. They will keep on. So first let them speak. Finish. First of all, if somebody has a complaint, the first thing that you should do is listen to that complaint. Okay. Let them say what they are saying. Finish that thing. Then say that both children involved in this problem have been warned. Okay. But you should make them understand that both, if there is mistake from both the side, but even if there is no mistake from both the side, you should talk to both the parents. As a teacher, it is your duty. Because just because this boy hit that boy doesn't mean that you shouldn't talk to the, the victim's parents. You should talk to both of them. Make them understand. To the victim's parents, you should make them understand that don't worry, we'll take care of the situation. To the other parents, let them talk. Let them say what they have to say. After that, you tell them, once you keep quiet and listen to them, they have no other option but to listen to you because you didn't interrupt them. Right? They are adults. So they'll understand now it's time for you to talk. Now you tell them clearly what has happened. And if at all such, you can clearly say school can have policies where you don't accept such behavior from their children. You can have policies like that. You can talk about that to the parents. You can say such probably hitting the child or something like that is not acceptable in our school. We don't like students doing things like these. Okay, so don't harass the child. Talk to the parents. Tell them that this is a warning. Tell them that this should not, keep on repeating. And tell them to make sure that the child understands it. Okay, and don't scream at the child or don't insult the child. Call the child and tell him, see, he's your friend, right? Why did you do this to him? What if he's your brother? What if somebody is doing this to you or your brother or your father? How will you feel? Make them understand how, if the same right of other person is violated, that person will feel. As I mentioned earlier, children also have they can also think. You think that they don't understand, they can understand. So if parents are screaming, let them scream, give them their time. After that, you say the rules of your school, you tell them what is going to happen and ask them to make sure that they make the child aware of it and treat the child well.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes. Anybody else? Anybody else? Okay, so one last question, ma'am. If a child is not paying the fees, does the school has the authority to remove the child? Non-payment of fees, because it is violating the right to education, right?
I will tell you what actually right to education is. It's a thought that right to education means you have to provide free education to all. That is not right. That is not the meaning of right to education. That means why should schools take fees? Yeah. You understand my concept, yes. My point? No. Then why should we have private schools? Why should we have big schools that has a big amount of fee? Their fee structure is quite big, high. A huge amount, right? So why do we have system like that? If it's free and compulsory education, We are talking
Yes.
about basic education. Okay. Here, when we
Basic
are talking about right to free and compulsory education, we are
That
talking
is
about
government schools. Government schools.
Yes, exactly. So if a child is not paying fee, that doesn't mean you can't remove the child from your roles. Doesn't mean that. Okay. Right to free and compulsory education doesn't mean if a child has come and put himself or if a parent has put his or her child in your school, that means they can afford that fee, right?
Yes,
That
yes.
is why they put the child in the school. Otherwise, they would have put the child in the public school where it is free.
So they cannot go for a complaint if we take action.
As far as my knowledge goes, I don't think they can go for a complaint. But you should not ask them to pay fee and next day take them away from class. There should be a proper procedure as to
Proper
what is to be
procedure of
followed.
it, yes.
Yes.
Okay.
But I don't know exactly what is the procedure or whether they can go and file a complaint. But I know that it doesn't come under the purview of right to free education.
Education. Okay. Okay,
That is not what it is.
okay, ma'am.
Yes. Basically, right to free education is more about having a good, concept of teachers, the teaching methods, probably for the teacher-student ratio. All those things are also concentrated on right to education. See, we talked about corporal punishments. So there are other concepts mentioned in right to education. Just that the Act's main thing is right to education. It's named right to education.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Okay.
If there are no more questions, can we wind up? Remy, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you, Arati ma'am, for giving us such a wonderful session. This is indeed very helpful and thought-provoking session. And once again, I'm giving thank you, ma'am. And I would like to invite Ms. Shanuja ma'am for giving a vote of thanks. Welcome, Shanuja ma'am.
Thank you, Ramya ma'am. Thank you. Good evening, all. Respected our Honorable Chief Guest, Ms. Arati Gopal. Respected faculties, Smita ma'am, Ashwati ma'am, and my dear colleagues. It is my privilege to thank each one present here on this occasion. First, I would like to thank NCDC for this wonderful opportunity to give for us. Then I would like to thank the most respected chief guest, Arati ma'am, for her valuable information and participation. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much.
Next, I would like to thank beloved Smita ma'am and Ashwati ma'am. Thank you, Smita ma'am, and thank you, Ashwati ma'am. I extend my heartily thank to each one present here. Last, I would like to thank all my dear colleagues for their support and cooperation. Thank you once again. Thank you, Arati ma'am, and thank you all.
Thank you, I think.
Special thanks to Bobby ma'am as well for arranging the session with Arati ma'am.
Yes. Thank you, Bobby.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you, Arati.
So I am leaving the meeting. Thank you so much.
You took so much of your time to explain in detail. And,
I hope it was helpful. You need anything regarding any of these, you can always contact me.
Yes, ma'am. Sure, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you so much, ma'am, for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you too. Thank you.
Thank you, Arati ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Can we sing the national?
Thank you, ma'am.
National anthem.
Can we all raise for national anthem?
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. जनगण अधिनायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड उत्कल बंगा विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्चल नदी तरंगा तव शुभ नामे जागे तव शुभाशिष मागे गाहे तव जय गाथा जनगण मंगलदायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता जय हे जय हे जय हे जय 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 हे जय
जय
हिंद।
हिंद। जय हिंद।